All right, beautiful. So people are going to start coming in. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Hello.
We have
Oh, Ed.
Michelle. We
Hi,
have.
Ed.
I noticed some
Woo!
some names in the registration that weren't familiar, and I'm thinking this must be Michelle's crew. Cool. Um, Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know Edwina too. That's really cool. Okay. Um, so we're so lucky to have Michelle here today. This is going to be spectacular. She's actually going to do a presentation for us, guys. So we're so lucky. First thing I want to do, though, I just want to share where you can find Michelle, and then we'll let her tell us who she is and what she does. Or maybe, Michelle, if you want to start talking over while I'm sharing your amazing website. Um, Incredible amount of information here, guys. So, Michelle, how long have you been doing this, and what sort of started you on this
Oh
journey?
my gosh.
Yeah, so it's a big question.
Big question because I really, at this point, I think I was born to do this because every experience I've had over the course of my life, long before I became consciously aware of any of this, was information and things I needed to be able to start putting this together. And I just want to say to all of you that the work that you're doing to heal ley lines is vitally important. And I'm going to be going through a PowerPoint presentation to give you specific examples of what I'm talking about. But um, the, this grid, this ley line energy grid, was vitally important in the original civilization. Everything was connected by it. There was one civilization across the face of the earth um, that was basically, I believe, co-creating with the creator what we see on the earth. I think it was like heaven on earth, where everything was perfectly placed, geometrically lined up with each other on the earth, with the heavens, what was going on in the heavens. And it was from ancient times to modern times, relatively modern. And then I think there was a deliberately caused cataclysm that destroyed the surface of the earth. And what we see on the earth today is nothing like us, like what it was. And they've just given us complete BS history,
Mm.
completely BS. They don't care that we have a belief, and the word lie is in belief. They don't want us to know the truth. So they removed the truth from the equation. They didn't invent it all from scratch. So I think there are historical figures that were based on real people. I think there were historical figures that were completely made up. But they wiped this civilization off the face of the earth and came in and they built from ground up. They dug out what they needed to restart the civilization, and they controlled the levers. They controlled the narrative. They controlled the schools. They only wanted children to learn how to read and write well enough to become workers. They removed critical thinking from the curriculum and proceeded to completely indoctrinate us in this fake history from cradle to grave. So we would never know. And we are the prize. Humanity is the prize. Earth is the prize.
Yes.
Source energy, our chi is the inner chi is the prize. That's why they're doing this.
Yeah.
They are parasites. They need our energy. And I think they've been pushing us towards transhumanism so they would have a perpetual source of energy,
Yeah.
transfer human consciousness into cyborg kind of
100%.
thing.
And I think we've
Vessels.
already got some of those wandering around. You see these puppets and they
So,
just don't seem to be human.
and I'm not saying this to be pessimistic about the future. I am extremely optimistic. I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that we know, and there's a lot more spiritual energies going on. I think um, we have benevolent ETs. I think we have angelic beings. I think we have the creator, the spirit of the creator coming back after having been, ripped from this awareness and downplayed. Um, a lot going on with persecution of Christians now.
Yeah.
Um, I'm more of a Gnostic, I think, but I respect the spirit of God where you find it. And what they did was they took um they gave us organized religions when they took out the civilization. So so that's all part of their power and control and manipulation of us to turn us into denominations and fracture us. So you have, I don't know how many, each said like Lutherans have like a gazillion Lutheran churches within that. And the same thing with the Baptists. Just as an example, it's a fracturing process, just like money, denominations. They took us from wholeness and they've just been, you know, fractalizing everything.
Absolutely, 100%. Your website is spectacular, and I just wanted to scroll through just so people can see just a tiny fraction of what you've actually put out there. So these are all links. So you can go in and if anything there was of interest to anybody, just go to the website piercingtheveilofillusion.com. Michelle's also got a YouTube channel which is spectacular, and honestly, you could you could spend years on this channel just learning. And just the number of different topics, the incredible people that you have on here, it's just amazing. So that's also under your name, I believe. Yeah, Michelle Gibson 8946. So
Mhm.
without further ado, Michelle, if you want to start sharing, have I made you
Okay.
co-host so you can? There we go. That would
Uh,
help.
no, there we go. Okay.
All right, so we're going to try and be quiet so that you can.
So we talked about this, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the PowerPoint that I put together, and then if anybody has any questions, ask at the end, and we can do it that way. I came into this awareness through learning about sacred geometry, basically in about 2006 or 7. And then I learned about ley lines, and then I learned about the Moors. And and the work that I've been doing with what I found that I'm going to be talking about here, it just kind of pulled everything together for me into a specific paradigm with which to interpret information that actually made a lot of sense and a lot more sense that the kinds of things that were told about our history. Um, but you just kind of have to let go of everything you've ever believed to be true in order to get new information in. And I found that to be the case. Um, Also, I believe there's a consciousness with the ley lines and they do communicate with us. And I was sharing earlier with Rachel and Billy that um, people that do this kind of work with like Ley Love Down are intuitively connected to these ley lines. And that's how we find out about them because their existence was removed from our awareness and they're hugely important. And, I've gotten this far by literally by connecting dots all across the earth and going and looking at each place and seeing the same architecture, the same hand of design, the same deserts, the same dunes, the same marshes, everything. And so I've come to the conclusion that they destroyed the grid. And then when the grid was destroyed, it destroyed the land around it. And I'm not just saying that, I will provide examples of what I'm talking about worldwide. So I'm going to start this presentation with the role of sacred geometry and ley lines for the original ancient advanced civilization. The placement and design of ancient cities and sacred sites was influenced by sacred geometry and ley lines, which align with terrestrial energies as well as celestial energies. Sacred geometry is a language of geometric patterns that spans all cultures, timelines, and species on Earth and beyond. It is the foundation of everything in existence when broken down into the smallest parts. And this is the flower of life pattern upon which it is based. And that includes, when the embryo is formed, and life starts, it, all the cell division is based on sacred geometry. It goes through a sequence of patterns that gives you the flower of life. So that's one example of many. We are sacred geometry ourselves. It is the creation pattern of the universe, and when you connect the centers of each circle, you find all the sacred geometric shapes are contained within it, including but not limited to the star tetrahedron, which is one of the 5 Platonic solids, all of which are contained within the flower of life. And this is important for my work, this shape here. The 5 shapes shown here are within the fruit of life, also known as Metatron's cube, in the flower of life pattern. Named after the Greek philosopher Plato, each one of these Platonic solids is a polyhedron, which is a solid with flat faces. Each face is of the same size and shape, and all are convex polyhedrons, meaning having many finite points, but not all in the same plane. And I just want to comment that information that seems to be coming in from some of the people that I work with, and I call them synchronistic co-creative partnerships because that's how it works, is this seems to be a interdimensional kind of process. Again, those kinds of things have been removed from our awareness, but there seems to be a piece of this, 2D, 3D, 4D, 5D, that is in play here. Ley lines represent the sacred geometric shapes that are contained within the flower of life when the lines are connected to the centers of the circles on the earth, and geometric linear and circular alignments that were groomed by the ancient civilization to harness and carry currents of electromagnetic earth energy, with pockets of concentrated energy at nodal points where they intersect. My own original research on this topic began in 2016 after I found the sacred geometric shape of a star tetrahedron on the North American continent. And this is what my work is based on. Then I wrote down the cities that lined up over long distances in lines and circles in spreadsheets. When I started researching these alignments starting in June of 2018 through blogging and then making videos from my blog posts, I got an amazing tour of the world of places I had never heard of with remarkable similarities across countries and continents and oceans, you name it. And I've been doing this for a long time, and my work is just going deeper and deeper and deeper. It's actually quite overwhelming, the amount of information that's available to find through this process. And I'm realizing I need to do better with self-care because uh, it's I do something on this every day, and today I just took the day off so I'd be fresh for tonight, and it's like I feel better, so it's like something's telling me I need to figure out how to pace myself a little bit better so that I'm not feeling yucky sometimes from it. Just a lot of information to process and put together. My life's journey also brought me into awareness of the Moors when I met a Moorish man when I moved to Oklahoma City in 2013 and started to receive that information through him on how to interpret what I was seeing in the form of the Moorish paradigm. A paradigm is a framework through which to interpret information. It was then what I was seeing in our world started to make sense. The original ancient advanced Moorish master builders applied sacred geometry and what is called Moorish science or Moorish masonry in creating their infrastructure and communities in harmony, balance, beauty, and unity with each other in the universe, going back to the time of Moors, and are an ancient people living in the present day. They're still very much with us. Along the way of my coming into doing my own work, I learned about the mathematical work of Carl Monk. Carl Monk deciphered a shared mathematical code in his book, The Code, related to the Great Pyramid of Giza and the dimensions of the architecture of sacred sites all over the earth, one which encodes longitude and latitude of each that cross-reference other sites. He turned his findings in the code into a video series which can be found on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. Carl's style is very dry, but the information is fascinating. And I should probably mention here that about the same time I was learning about sacred geometry, I was learning about Drunvalo Melchizedek and his work, if anybody's familiar with him. And this was several years before I started doing what I do now. All of this was important information to come my way. But I watched a lot of Drunvalo's videos, and in one of them, Birth of a New Humanity, I believe it was, he talked about this physical infrastructure of the grid. And at the time I thought, well, that sounds wonderful, but who built it? And that seems to be part of my journey, is figuring that out and, bringing how everything was connected together. I mean, I would call that my specialty, as a physical infrastructure of the grid. And then another thing he said in a different video, the Maya of eternal time, he said, the ancients need us and we need them. They need us to remember them, but we need each other. So again, why have we gone through this? Well, something new is coming in, and all of us are part of this, all of us that are called to do this work on ley lines, because the healing of the ley lines is so vitally important. Carl shows that this pyramid code is clearly sophisticated and intentional and perfectly aligned over long distances. It's perfect. Everything. The Giza Plateau has been long studied by all different kinds of researchers, and perhaps the starting point for many of us delving into the mysteries to be found on the Earth. What I'm sharing here are just a few of countless examples. The golden ratio can be found throughout the Giza Plateau. It's probably one of the most studied, though there are excellent researchers that have been pulling this kind of information out, and a lot of dowsers have been involved in bringing the ley lines back by tracking them. And then, people that have a bent towards geometry and math have been finding the geometries in different places. Howard Crowhurst is one. You can find his work on the Brittany stones. And these were all parts of my journey with watching all this stuff and going, oh, wow, well, how did that happen? And so as part of my education, so that when I was ready to do my own work, I kind of knew what to do, essentially. The golden ratio, also known as the golden number, golden proportion, or divine proportion, is a ratio between two numbers that equals 1.618, which is the value for phi, the basis of the golden ratio, and found in architecture, the human body, DNA, and nature, among others. I have come to believe all the precisely and geometrically placed infrastructure on the Earth was all part of one vast circuit board that, among other things, generated and transmitted free energy. I believe that the circuit board of the Earth's original pyramid-based energy grid system was deliberately blown out within the last couple of hundred years at the most. This didn't happen thousands of years ago. This happened a few hundred, maybe even more recently than that. I think it was done by one or more forms of directed frequency or energy, either at the same time or different times within a finite period, causing the surface of the Earth to undulate and buckle of some kind. Okay. Because there's just so much devastation on the surface of the Earth. I believe the civilization we know of as Atlantis, like I just said, sank hundreds of years ago. We're talking about Atlantis. I think we're talking about who the Aryans really were. I think they were all part of the same people. And if any of you guys are familiar with Sanat Kumara, that R sound, there's a tie into that, but that's not my area of expertise. But I do believe there's a connection with Sanat Kumara and all of this in the original civilization. What I'm seeing from tracking ley lines all over the Earth, looking from place to place at cities in alignment over long distances, are the consistent presence of swamps, marshes, bogs, deserts, dunes, and places where it appears land masses sheared off and submerged under the bodies of water we see today. And this is just a screenshot from a ley line that I tracked from the middle of the Bermuda Triangle to Lake Itasca in Minnesota. And this was brought forward by Peter Champoux. His website is geometryofplace.com. And one of my viewers mentioned it, and I had done a little bit of research initially on the Cape Fear area of North Carolina from this guy's recommendation, and then I decided to track it all the way up. And this is really where I started putting together the whole, destruction of the surface of the Earth and all the marshes and all the, everything. I mean, you can look at Sydney Airport and it looks like JFK International Airport. It's like right next to this estuary where the land is just, so I think even airports were pre-existing. I think everything we think that was built in modern times was already there. But that's as I've been going deeper into this ley line research and just finding countless examples of that. And it does get to be overwhelming, but I do try to provide as many examples of what I'm talking about with that. I believe that those behind the destruction of the energy grid ushered in the creation of a new world order built on top of the ruins of the old world, and that what we think of as modern infrastructure, because that was what we've been told in the official narrative, was actually pre-existing, like I said. Railways, canals, lighthouses, nuclear power plants. I'm landing on that because I find them in wetlands. And why are you going to build a nuclear power plant in a marsh? Those kinds of things. Not only that, but then these malevolent controllers reverse engineered the original energy grid system for the benefit of all life everywhere into what is commonly called the matrix for power and control, as well as the harvesting of energy for the benefit of the very few. And unfortunately, that's been going on as well. We don't know it. We don't know that when we go to the stadium for a ball game or a concert, that it's an energy harvesting mechanism. And even roads used to have railroad tracks. They took the railroad tracks out and put roads over them. But that was part of the energy system. So you go from the free energy trams and streetcars that are already there. Melbourne is one of the few places in the world that has almost an intact streetcar system. They used to be all over the earth, and they got taken out, except in a very few places. Um, so anyway, but that was connected to the grid. It wasn't built when we were told, and that energy transfer is going somewhere. They just changed the transfer. Um, They had to, okay. So I believe that negative beings were behind the cataclysm and hostile takeover and have executed and implemented an elaborate multi-generational plan comprised of fallen angels, reptilians, archons, demons, and other negative beings with a negative agenda towards humanity, the creator and creation, all of whom have been interfering on Earth. They had to do it this way because in a free will zone like Earth, the human beings who live here have to give their consent to choose whether to follow the light or the dark. So this whole fake system has been set up so that we would consent to their evil plans because we don't know. They haven't told us. They haven't told us what they're doing to us without us knowing about it. All the siphoning of our energy and, giving us a fake history and fake science and fake everything else. Some people get triggered by seeing a planet in a graphic. When I started this journey, I didn't have an opinion. I know that they've tampered with our whole perception of space and place, and I'm on board with the shape of the Earth is not what we've been told. I actually think the Earth is probably the center of the universe, Grand Central Station. Very important. But we go with what we've got. So this is a free will zone. They have to have our consent. So they get our consent by lying to us, essentially. Because if people knew the true agenda of these controllers, the majority of humanity would never ever accept what they've done. Like I said earlier, when I started researching these alignments starting in June of 2018, so it's been about 7 years, through blogging and then making videos from my blog posts, I got an amazing tour of the world of places I'd never heard of. And so these are some of the things that I would find all over: the hot springs, springs of all kinds, waterfalls, salt lakes, copper mines, mountain ranges that look like pyramids or other unusual shapes, geometric shapes like earthworks, mounds, infrastructures that are covered up, snaky S-shaped rivers, canals, arched bridges, lighthouses, onion domes all over the world. national, state, and local parks are full of information if you look at it differently. Universities, schools, cathedrals, churches, castles, and palaces around the world, domed capitol buildings around the world, all manner of buildings still in use to this day. The ones that are still there, a lot of them have been torn down. Aqueducts, and then any place with large stone blocks in general, ruins, canyons, bluffs, mesas, escarpments, hoodoos, which are phallic shapes, chimney rocks, and anything natural. Natural arches, bridges, steps, windows. And then all the artificially shaped harbors, islands, and so forth that you see. It's like it's clearly built and not natural in so many harbors. And I'm going to go through a lot of examples, so please bear with me. And then I'm going to start with this. This is one of the first alignments that I did. This Darwin alignment from History Reads Like a Book on the Planetary Grid that I did back in October of 2018. So this is one of my first ones that I actually went from place to place to place to place to place over a long distance. Now when I try to do the same thing, it takes me forever because I've learned a lot in the in-between, and so I can add a lot to them. So these early ones didn't quite have as much information and were a lot shorter, but I've been on this journey for quite a while. So this has been coming to me over like 7-8 years for this work, but it started coming to me a long time ago. So this particular alignment enters Australia and Darwin, and this long distance alignment started in Edmonton in Alberta and passes through the Timor Sea and Arafura Sea and lands here in the capital of the Northern Territory. Don't know how many of you are familiar with the bombing of Darwin during the Second World War. It was the location of the first bombing in Australia, which occurred in February of 1942 after Australia had officially declared war on Japan on December 9th of 1942. Japanese forces bombed military bases in Darwin in one day, and one of the first hits and explosions was a ship loaded with TNT and ammunition. So I find wars all along these ley lines, problems, economic problems, human problems, earthquakes, you name it. And it seems to all be geared towards damaging this grid system that all of you are committed to healing, which is, again, so important. They've really attacked it very hard when they first destroyed it. And then in our whole history has really been about this, but it's been framed in a way that we would accept it. So these wars were actually creating havoc intentionally on the grid system and humanity by extension. So so let's see here. Here's a picture of Darwin today. A particular note is the shaped harbor in the foreground, which is the signature of places along these alignments. They look like that, just like that. So that's one example. If you guys can see my pictures here. So leaving Darwin and just on the outskirts, we find Howard Springs Nature Park. I see exactly the same kind of thing everywhere. We are taught that there was nothing special going on in these places, nothing to see. So we fail to recognize the ancient megalithic masonry lying all around us, which you can see here and here in Darwin. The megalithic stone blocks lining the walkway. And again, I mentioned with the list of things that I find, springs are up at the top of the list. And then this is Martin Nature Park in Oklahoma City. This is where I started to wake up to all of this stuff where I was living. And you see the same megalithic stone blocks lining the walkway of this nature park. So you're going along and you're looking at the trees and everything else, and you're not paying attention to the megalithic stone blocks until you really tune into it. And then you find out they're everywhere, literally. The alignment goes through Kakadu National Park and then through Arnhem Land. Kakadu National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And besides its biodiversity and river systems, it's one of the most productive uranium mines in the world, which is the Ranger mineral leases on here. Again, I find mineral activity all along these alignments, and I think it was part of the working components of the grid itself. It's called like your car. You know, your car has to have certain things in certain places to get it to run, and I think it was the same thing with the grid system. And I think when they destroyed the grid, they knew where to go to start mining. And so I think they're mining the grid of all of its components, just like till there's nothing there, and then they leave, and then they've messed up the environment and they've messed up the communities that depended on them for jobs, and basically leave ghost towns and whatever else. Well, you know, I'll be inside. They don't care. They don't care about us. And quite honestly, I don't know if all of this stuff that they're mining all over the world is staying on Earth or if it's going somewhere else. And there's so much mining, it wouldn't be surprised to me to find out it's going off planet. Aboriginal people have occupied this land continuously for 40,000 years, and approximately half of the land of Kakadu is Aboriginal. And this is as good as any place to leave this photo here for your consideration. I personally think that there is something to it, that the Australian Aborigines are of the tribe of Reuben, and I believe the Moors and the real tribes of Israel are one and the same. And they've done such a hatchet job with the original people and, you know, basically kicked them back to the Stone Age. And it's not just there, it's everywhere. It's, you know, the Native Americans, the same thing. The people of Africa, the same thing. Um, they stole their identity and their legacy and trashed them, you know, essentially. And these are very powerful people spiritually. All of the original people, all of the indigenous people around the world are very closely connected to the creator. Um, Melanin is a superconductor. And if you look up what is the value of melanin today, it's up there. Um, a high dollar value. So they um, covet this melanin and the original people. There's something going on there that's very well hidden, but these people are particularly sought after, and they've been genocided as well, again, all over the earth. So anyway, for your consideration, I know it's controversial, but that's what I think. The tribes of Israel were all over the earth, and their identity was stolen by the Rothschilds and those guys. Um, you know, basically, you're saying that these folks are the owners of the traditional lands of Australia, and you know, tens of thousands of years, but they didn't build all this stuff, and the Europeans didn't build all this stuff. Then you're looking for a completely different group of people. When I think the answer is right there, hidden from us. Um, Okay, so Kakadu National Park, as I said, is part of Arnhem Land, one of the 5 regions of the Northern Territory. While the land is named for the ship of the Dutch East India Company captain who sailed into the Gulf of Carpentaria, which I will be covering shortly, the population of this region is actually mostly Aboriginal, estimated to be around 16,000. The photo on the left is Arnhem Land, and the photo on the right is Meenab in southern Iran, in the vicinity of the old city of Hormuz. So what was Hormuz in Iran is now Meenab. And that's another thing they do is they change names. So we don't know anything about the original cities and anything like that. I have no difficulty seeing all of this as ancient infrastructure. I had a perceptual shift when I realized there's a code of keywords that covers up the ancient civilization. But for most, since we haven't been taught about this ancient civilization and have only been taught to believe that it is the result of natural processes, and that's how it's perceived. And, for people that are up to speed on meltology, I think the effects of the destruction of the grid were multiple. And so different kinds of things happened in different places. And so I think this would be like an example of a melted infrastructure in that view of what happened here. The alignment crosses the Gulf of Carpentaria in Queensland, Australia. The Gulf of Carpentaria is described as a shallow sea enclosed on 3 sides and bounded on the north by the Arafura Sea, which lies between Australia and New Guinea. So here's an aerial view of the Gulf of Carpentaria. And where my research is taking me is this is an example of land that would have broke off and sank, and that's why it's shallow. And then that's what you see like here in the Pellew Islands, that used to be like a part of a wall. And we'll see more examples of this as I go through these. This was explored by Matthew Flinders in the early 1800s. This coast and around and down off the southern coast of Australia. And Flinders was exploring this part of the world when Lewis and Clark were exploring North America, when Alexander von Humboldt was going around and measuring the magnetism of different locations. And I think they were former giant trees at this point. I think the giant trees were our magnetic field. And I think they were all doing this exploration after the cataclysm took place. I think that's what they were doing. They were exploring the post-cataclysmic world, seeing what was there, claiming land for their various countries. And I think that's what was going on during that time period. And that would have been like between the 1800 and 1850s was this age of exploration. And then that was when Darwin and the Beagle came out and did their tour, and a lot going on in Australia during that time in the 1840s as well, surveying and doing different kinds of things, getting mining started. Again, when you look at Google Earth, you see just right under the surface of these bodies of water, you see what looks like land or mud or whatever. And this is all over Mornington Island and the Wellesley Islands and the Gulf of Carpentaria. Whatever that was. It looks interesting anyway. I talked about these S-shaped rivers that are all over the earth. I think that was part of the energy grid. I think the shape of the river had something to do with structuring water and providing power in the system. So you see the same thing in Queensland between Karumba and Normanton. There in the top left, and then you have the River Thames in London, England, with the S shapes, and then in Inner Mongolia, same thing with the shapes. And I could give you countless examples at this point, and we're going to see a few more, I think, as we go through this. So Cairns comes next, and it was said to have been settled in order to serve miners going to the Hodgkinson River goldfield. And you find these railways connected with that. I said earlier, I think the railroads were part of this system as well. So they got the railroads up and running, and then they used them for mining. Same story repeats everywhere. So you've got the Cairns is considered the gateway to the Great Barrier Reef. It spans 1,400 miles or 2,300 kilometers off the Queensland coast. The world's largest coral reef system with 2,900 individual reefs and 900 islands, and visible from space, and also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And then you've got the Torres Strait Islands, and so there's 274 small islands between Australia's Cape York and New Guinea. Again, where I'm at with all of this is I think this was all above land at one point, or above water at one point. And then you see here on the left, you see what looks like some kind of wall going into the water. And I can bring forward other examples of that as well, where you see what looks like megalithic stone blocks underneath the water at low tide. High tide, you can't see that at all. And I've got photos of that from Bundibal in New South Wales, I believe. Um, and then here you see in the Great Barrier Reef what looks like an S-shaped river in the middle of the water. And then on the right-hand side, you see megalithic stone blocks under the water. So again, I think this land was above water not that long ago, actually. So this next series of slides I'm going through is again from one of the first ones I did back in January of 2019. And this is the Australian part of it. It was a long distance alignment where I started in Amsterdam Island in the Indian Ocean, and I took it around through Mauritius and the Seychelles and Somalia and the Gulf of Aden and Yemen and the United Arab Emirates, the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, Mongolia, back through China again, North Korea, Japan, the Bonin Islands, the Northern Marianas Islands, the island of Pohnpei, and the Caroline Islands, and the Solomon Islands through Australia, starting in Brisbane, which is what I'm going to be showing you where it goes through Australia. So this is a very long distance alignment. A lot of the ones that I do are long distance, which is why I've been able to accumulate so much information about all the similarities and what was going on there and what they tell us and who was there and how they did it. And it's just kind of left me with a high level of awareness about a lot of different things that's been hidden and taken my direction, my research in a lot of different directions from where I started with all of this, which was tracking ley lines. So in Brisbane, you have the metropolitan area starts on the left goes from Moreton Bay on the coast to the Great Dividing Range. So again, to point out, you've got the word more in there, and you think, well, they just named that because of, but there's a lot of hidden information in names like that. And that's the Brisbane River, so you see the S shapes. And then in the history of Brisbane, you have the Central Business District was said to have been built on the location of a historic European settlement located inside a peninsula of the Brisbane River, about 9 miles or 14 kilometers from the mouth of Moreton Bay. And it was said to be one of the oldest cities in Australia and founded on ancient indigenous lands in 1825. So here's some historic photos of Brisbane 100 years later from when it was said to have been founded and built. And so this would have been circa 1925 or 1926. So in 100 years, you go from nothing in our narrative to this. Again, this story is repeated over and over again. And so are the Great Fires. That story is also found everywhere. So that took place in 1864, only 39 years after what we were told was the founding of the city in 1825. And this particular fire was said to have burned out of control in the city's central business district for several hours, destroying several blocks of businesses and homes. That's what's available to find in the narrative. Then only 68 years after the city was established, the Great Flood of Brisbane took place in 1893. And at that time, as a result of 8 days and 20 inches or 508 millimeters of rain, the Brisbane River rose almost 24 feet or 7 meters. And we're seeing this happening in the US right now. There's a lot of places that are getting this incredible amount of flooding in a short period of time just in the last week. So yes, I do believe they have the ability to turn on and turn off the water, whether it's hydrologically or, there's some talk about cloud seeding right now. So, so they are definitely into weather warfare and engineering and things like that for destruction. So, But again, that architecture here is grand architecture with heavy masonry, cupolas, huge arches, and huge columns that were said to have been built in less than 70 years in our narrative. And this is what you see in Europe and all over the world. But that's where it's held up the most, is in Europe. But this was everywhere. So Fort Bribie on Bribie Island in Moreton Bay was said to have been built from 1939 to 1943 during the World War II time period for the defense of southeast Queensland and to provide artillery training for Australian soldiers heading overseas. There's actually an underground complex at the site that was purported to have been a hospital, but then nobody really knows much about it, except that a large complex has been determined to lie beneath the sand here. So again, like something was buried here. And then you have two other forts in Moreton Bay that form a triangle. So again, you've got the geometry. Personally, I think these forts were batteries, actual batteries on the grid system. And then they got repurposed as military fortifications for the purposes of the new narrative, which gave an explanation for what they were and then an actual excuse to destroy them. But the same kinds of things are found again all over the earth. Same shapes, everything. And I think they were components of the grid system. I just wanted to show you a comparison of the canals in the Gold Coast, off the coast of Queensland, and what you see in places like Port Lauderdale, where you have the same kind of canal system going on. Again, these are just two of countless examples I could show you, but we'd be here all night if I gave you every example that I had. We'd be here for days. So just wanted to show you the similarity of that. While not really well known to the general public, there are 10 registered pyramids in the Australian state of Queensland. I would like to point out two of the best known ones. The first is the Gympie Pyramid in Gympie, a short distance north of Brisbane. I found things like descriptions of the Gympie Pyramid as terraced sandstone hill, and also things saying that it's man-made, but in modern times, in the early 2000s, as a landscape feature for a vineyard and not in ancient times. My understanding, this is on private land and not open to the public. The other one is called the Ballindine Pyramid on private property, but viewable from the road in the village of Ballindine in Queensland. This one is openly acknowledged to be man-made, however, and also said to have been made in modern times when the landowner paid someone to do something with the surplus granite rocks that had been excavated for the land's agricultural use. So, and that's pretty typical of pyramids around the world. Either they're modern or, somebody was just picking up rocks and putting them in a shape. These are things they don't want us to know or be aware of. But I think this grid system was pyramid-based, pyramid power, and there was a connection with celestial energies and maybe even vortexes with these pyramids and the grid system. And I don't know how many of you know that there is a Stonehenge in Esperance in Western Australia. And I didn't know that, and I was doing some research down there, and it was on my Google Earth. I think like photos or something, and I pressed on it, and there's the Stonehenge there. And it's got the same kind of backstory. This one is we're told the only full-size replica of the original Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain of England, appearing as the original would have looked in 1950 BC. And the astronomical alignments of the Esperance Stonehenge include the summer solstice, the winter solstice, and the Milky Way. And so this is what we're told about the origins of the Esperance Stonehenge. The stones were quarried and cut for a Stonehenge project in Margaret River in 2008, but the project fell through a year later. And here they had all these stones ready for the project, and the Rotary Club of Esperance took interest in building a Stonehenge replica locally. The owners of a hobby farm across from the quarry decided to take the project on their own dime, starting in 2011, and that it was designed by a local architect. It opened as a paying tourist attraction in 2017. These are heavy, heavy stones. And I'm sorry, I don't believe the story. Even though you can go on their website and see pictures of it being built, I just have a really, really hard time believing that this was built in 2008. And, you can Well, what people would have known that was recently, but you can block access to places you don't want people to see. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do that. And then there's a full-size Stonehenge in Washington State as well, called the Maryhill Stonehenge. So, again, these kinds of things are covered up and packaged to us a different way. So we don't know these things and think, oh yeah, that's a tourist attraction. Yeah, they did that. It's like, I don't think we have the technology to be able to build the same way that they did. So continuing on the alignment back to the Great Dividing Range, also known as the Great Divide, or the Eastern Highlands, pretty much parallels the coast of Australia for about 2,300 miles or 3,700 kilometers. It's described as a series of plateaus and low mountain ranges. Again, at this point in my research, I see giant trees and things like that where I didn't before. So they could be connected with that or some other kind of infrastructure, walls or something like that. But there are things in the landscape that we've always been told were natural or geologically formed. I think in many cases are actually ancient masonry. So this is an example of that. So the Three Sisters in the Great Dividing Range reminded me of what I saw when I was looking at Agatu Island and the Aleutian Islands, the furthest western part. So they come off of the state of Alaska. There's a chain of islands, actually quite close to the Soviet Union, but very similar in appearance here. So we get to Dubbo in New South Wales, and you see the post office, I believe, which was said to have been built in 1887 on the left. And I put the Moorish clock tower, or Torre Morisca in Guayaquil, Ecuador, on the right. Just for similarities. Same thing here, the band rotunda in Dubbo compared with what is called the Moorish kiosk in Hermosillo, Mexico. And I found that on a different alignment. I find all these things on alignments for the most part. Though like I said, I've done in-depth research on a lot of different areas. Next, the alignment crosses over the Murray River, which forms the border between New South Wales and Victoria. And there's another S-shaped river. And then along the riverside, you see the same kind of landform that you see in Monument Valley in northern Arizona. And again, I think you're probably looking at very ancient infrastructure here, and it does kind of look melted. So, something along those lines. But I don't buy that they're all natural features. But that's what they want us to believe, and that's what we've been educated in. So the alignment crosses into, forgive my pronunciation, Geelong, I guess. I'm going to go with Geelong, but it might be Geelong, but let's go with Geelong. So that's what we're going to look at next. This is a photo of the old Geelong exhibit building and Market Square clock tower. The clock tower was demolished in 1923, and the remaining buildings were demolished in the early 1980s to make room for the brand new shopping center at that time. So let's get rid of the beautiful buildings that probably have a functional purpose and replace it with a shopping center. And a historic photo of the old Geelong post office said to have been built between 1890 and 1891, which has actually survived to the present day, which many of these haven't. But there are some interesting looking things that are no longer present, like these here, the wires and this kind of pole in front, which probably had something to do with the streetcar system, I would guess. But they're gone. But the building's still there, which is pretty good. And you've got this rod at the top, which would have been part of the Antiquitech of the grid system. And then you get to Portland, leaving Australia and heading back to Amsterdam Island. And this is the oldest European settlement in New South Wales on Portland Bay. It's a deep seaport. And I just wanted to share, so there's active volcanoes in Victoria State between Portland and Geelong. And I found a high correlation between these ley line alignments and the occurrence of volcanoes. I found some in France. Didn't know there were volcanoes in France. Didn't know there were volcanoes in Australia at the time. And now these are to me candidates for giant trees at one time. I think that's what volcanoes were. I think there's a connection between the giant trees and volcanism and the grid system as well. And then my last slide is this example of this historic hotel in Portland on the top left, compared with a colonial building in Cape Town in South Africa, the bottom middle, and then on the top right with a building in New Orleans, Louisiana. And then just a few more things here. So these were some other places in Australia that I found from my alignments from the North American star tetrahedron that I found. Broken Hill shows up on several of them, so I think that was an important place. And I just want to say that the location in Wollongong, where this comes in from New Zealand, is right next to where I'm going to be in February, the end of February next year. I'll go back to that, but that's kind of where it goes through in the Cornwall area of Wollongong. Through here, I didn't do the whole thing, but that's just to kind of give you an idea. And if anybody is interested in learning a little bit more about this retreat that we're having at the retreats at Golden Ridge, Di Riley's beautiful retreat location, we're just going to reconnect and have a good time together. And I'm going to be doing something on that ley line going into Wollongong for part of this, some kind of healing. And if anybody's interested in learning more about this, there's still some openings, and the contact information is here. di@relaxkidsillawarra.com.au for further information and bank details. So wanted to get that out there. There's still some openings, and if you're interested, please let me know, or get a hold of Di at her email there. Other places, I found one coming in from the Solomon Islands through Willis Island, Mount Isa in Australia, where there are copper mines, through Cloncurry, the MacDonnell Ranges, Uluru, Lake Carnegie, Lake Barley, Kalbarri, and then that goes across to Cape Town. All of these places here have mines on them. So again, I started when I was connecting the dots, I started getting bigger picture pieces about this relationship between mining and the ley lines. Here's another one. I haven't actually tracked this particular one, but those are some places as well. And Rachel, I can send you my spreadsheets with the Australian locations that I found.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
And here's,
it's amazing that you pointed out Geelong, because that was one of the places that my father lived in. It's obviously a very important alignment. And my childhood home was actually on an important alignment in Adelaide. So, he must have known about these things as well.
yeah. And this actually came up on my X feed right before this call tonight. The universe conspires in your favor when you align with your purpose. And that has certainly been the case in what I've been doing with this work. I mean, I couldn't have planned it.
Oh, Michelle,
It's
thank
just
you
something that
so
happened
much.
along the way.
It's incredible, isn't it? You get a calling, and then it's your calling because the passion is there. You mentioned earlier you do some of this every day, and clearly it's not because it makes you feel fantastic. It's probably quite stressful. I did some mapping of Adelaide, the town that I grew up in, and I felt sick through most of it, realizing what had been done and where the alignments were. It's sickening to the stomach, but it's also like I've got to get this out there because it's so important. People need to know.
And then there's all the railroads that were through there. I mean, and Tasmania's history. I've looked at Tasmania quite a bit, and you've got the Walls of Jerusalem Park there. You've got the Solomon Islands.
Mm.
Um, and Tasmania's history is the same. You've got the star forts. You've got they've taken out the railroads for the most part. They might use it for freight, and then they have rail trails. So we have all these recreational trails where there used to be railroads. Well, why take the railroads out? It's the history makes no sense and it falls apart when you scrutinize it closely. It is so flimsy.
Mm.
But it was successful because they had control of the schools and everything else, and they just took all this stuff out of the history, so they don't teach us about it, and we're none the wiser.
Oh
Why
yeah,
would they lie to us?
yeah. Well, because they
And
have so much, as you said.
and I think it was because of the goal is not to improve our lives.
No,
The goal is to take our energy and our joy and replace it with pain and suffering, which is what they need.
yeah, yeah.
And but I can't stress enough how important the work that all of you are guided to do with healing the ley lines is, because clearly they've damaged a lot through their activities over the years, and the ley lines do need to be healed, most definitely.
Yeah, once I realized that the company that seems to own everything in the world called BlackRock, I think that's what their intention is, to create a Black Rock, so their cyborgs can own it and we'll just be gone.
And well, there's also the Rupus Negra, the black. I think the closest depiction I've seen to the surface of the Earth that resonates with me is the map with the four continents with the black rock in the middle, the
Oh,
1595 Mercator map.
wow.
Of all the ones I've seen, because I look at Pangea maps, I'm like, okay, so this land sank. I look at the Pangea maps and I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Maybe there was a Tethys Sea, and I've encountered Tethys, Tethys. Um, so that was like the primordial sea.
Oh, wow.
Um, the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. So the Tethys Sea margin is in North Africa, about where that is. Atlas held the world up on his shoulders in our what we learn about Greek mythology. So I think there's a connection with the Atlas Mountains, maybe in the whole scheme of things. Um, and I think this cataclysm, deliberately caused cataclysm, just caused the earth to, and they've given us this fake science, fake geology, um, spinning globe, uh, ice ages. They want us to believe everything's been happening the same rate and speed forever and ever and ever. No cataclysm. We don't talk about that. That's not how this happened. You can't even talk about it.
No.
Um,
And yet
but
the mud flood evidence is so painfully obvious. You can't hide
yeah.
that, because these buildings have all these underground levels.
And over here too. I mean, this is everywhere.
Mm.
I mean, I live in where the old West meets the old world in Prescott, Arizona. It's like rodeos and cowboys and shoot 'em ups and bad guys, and that's the history. And I'm walking past these old world buildings all the time, and like it's like people don't see it, but
Yeah.
there's a lot underground. You've got the streets that go up, and you've got hills everywhere. So where I'm at with that, I think maybe a standing wave or something went through the surface of the earth and just
Mm.
caused damage and rolling hills, and there's a lot more to it than that. But that I think what we call the mud flood is a combination of maybe that standing wave and the destruction of the grid and the trees um, giving us pyroclastic flows and ash columns with eruptions that provided this covering of the earth, because there's entire cities buried
Mm.
that people are finding out about and bringing up.
Do you have an
It's,
opinion on the pillars underneath the middle pyramid in Giza? Have you seen the
I've seen about it. I mean, there's just so much to uncover. This is a
yeah,
highly technologically advanced civilization going back a very, very long way.
yeah, and there's so much proof. So And thank God for people like yourself who are producing this sort of information and obviously, so passionate about it. And I know I know when we were advertising to do this, that so many people were excited. Oh my God, I can't believe you're having Michelle on because Michelle knows so much. So just know that, your work is appreciated across so many different, areas, because you cover so much. Yeah, absolute
So,
joy.
like, I see a highly advanced civilization that was working together in unity consciousness, co-creating this beautiful world. Everything perfectly geometrically placed on the earth in relationship to each other as well as the heavens. So with
Mm.
these celestial alignments, the solstices and the Milky Way and the Pleiades and um, eclipse paths, um, things
It,
like
it
that.
amazes me, that they're very obvious in Australia about the naming of the streets. So there's a place in Tamworth, I believe it was, where there's Orion Street, more than one Orion Street, and it's surrounding, really significant buildings. And they're not even trying to hide it. But again, it relies upon us staying stupid and not noticing. But we're noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when they gave us the internet to control us, they gave us the means for our awakening.
Yeah.
And, I'm afraid they might have gotten away with it without the internet, but that gave us the ability to connect like this and do our own research. And I never got the memo about critical thinking. I think that was because I unplugged from the matrix a long time ago
Yep.
in the way that I lived my life. I made a lot of decisions that weren't expected of me and did things that most people wouldn't do. I moved a lot. Um, and so I was never really amenable to that programming. Now, I've got a cousin on my dad's side and a cousin on my mom's side that are more awake than most people. Not necessarily with what I'm talking about, but in general. But
Yep.
most of my family is sound asleep.
Wow.
And so the connections come from uh, the cyber community, and our ability to do these kinds of things. And the fact that more and more people are taking the bull by the horns and doing their own research and, even becoming content creators.
Mm.
Since we have the means to do that. I mean, I never in a million years saw myself doing anything like this. And then all of a sudden I understood the download I got over the course of my life. And it was like, okay, I got to get this out.
Yeah.
And in having to get this out, it's like, okay, well, I had to teach myself to make videos and um, I had never blogged before. I've always been a good writer, but I never had anything to write about. And then all of a sudden, this comes in. It's like I've got more work than I can possibly do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But it's easy. This is easy for me, and it's just it's like a flow. But I do feel like I'm guided. Um,
You're
I
like a
have
mood
guidance.
point yourself, Michelle, because you're the inspiration for other people to do the same sort of work, which I hope you recognize because it's something to be incredibly proud of. People don't have to do it to the same level as you, but they can just have a
Yeah,
look around
no,
their own local area.
yes,
I think it's
yeah.
really,
That's all you have to do. All you have to do is go around your neighborhood. I'm telling you, you don't have to go far. Go around your neighborhood and film it and talk and then put it on YouTube. And I know people that have done that are doing that. You don't have to do what I'm doing. I
yeah.
wouldn't recommend what I'm doing unless you really want to.
Well, I've started
Instead,
doing that.
my head feels like it's going to explode.
Yeah, Billy started. She sent me some fantastic photos the other day of Albury.
Yeah, yeah. I've come back to my hometown and places that I never thought were important. They were just cool lookouts and monuments and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's given me the push to like be curious and not have to understand everything. But yeah, so that's good for you putting out the information you do and Rachel and everyone else. It just sparks in curiosity,
Mm.
especially for me as well. So, and that's all we need, just being curious.
Mm. Absolutely.
And really, this is about our journey back into the heart.
Yep.
That's our ultimate destination. And we can't ascend or evolve spiritually if we're stuck in the same level of consciousness that's created this mess.
No.
And, our brains are polarized. Our hearts are not.
Yeah.
Our hearts are meant to be our intelligence. And so we have, this is where we have to go. And that's letting go of prejudices, that's letting go of beliefs. That's all been brought to us by the controllers. They've divided humanity by race and religion and lies, but we're all the same.
Mm.
And so, again, to receive new information, you have to let go of everything you've ever believed to be true. And that's hard. That's hard for us. But that's what really this is about, is our spiritual evolution. And we as a collective humanity, we have to get back into our hearts and evolve together. And so this is very much a spiritual journey for me, but also when I was getting all the information I needed to be able to start doing this on my own, one of the pieces of information I came across um, was the idea that we're all cells in the body of God. We're consciousness cells in the body of God. So it's like your own body. If your cells were fighting each other and not working together, we wouldn't be able to live. And maybe that's what cancer is. I mean, our body destroys itself when
Yeah.
it's fighting. But as a consciousness, we're all the creator having our own unique experience, which is the gnosis part. And so we're sovereign beings. They can't do what they've done. They know that. So they've given us this fake legal system, tricked us into giving our sovereignty away. And oh yeah, by the way, to worship them.
Yes.
And they're frauds.
Mm.
They're all frauds. I'm not as they are. They're not the original royalty. They just came in when this hijack took place. They came in and deposed the original families. And again, I think this is all connected to the tribes of Israel and Solomon and the lineage of Solomon, for the kings,
Yeah.
leaders, queens. The divine feminine was men and women were looked at differently, and women very, very revered in this. And women were the life givers, life bearers. So they were held high positions in this original civilization, matriarchal.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I do believe we're going back there. And, one of the reasons why I like to share this sort of information and, get to have wonderful conversations with people like yourself, um, I believe that the more the key to undoing the grid structure is knowing that the structure is there. It's actually the
yeah,
energetic knowing of it. We don't necessarily have to go out and destroy these buildings and do anything really physically damaging, in my opinion. What we can do is just wake up to it. And then our collective consciousness will change the grid system and make it more
exactly,
organic again.
exactly. We're not goners. We're not. I do not believe that.
No.
I believe something new and amazing is coming in.
Yeah.
And considering all they've done to us, and I know from my own experience, there's miracles every day. There's synchronicities every day, even with all the crazy. And seeing this play out is very surreal.
Mm.
When you're awake and you see things differently, and everybody around you just isn't there and doesn't see it. And um, I have a kind of a quiet, reclusive life at this point, but I prefer that until things change, but change visibly. It seems like we're kind of in that in between, weird in between place.
No,
But
absolutely.
I do see, um, with things like what Ley Love Down does, and other people that are called into their spiritual gifts, that are able to see energies and get it, get the idea that we're moving into our higher consciousness of love, and they make dramatic choices, maybe leave relationships or whatever, because where they are, they're no longer okay.
Yeah.
Um, they've had a deeper realization. Um, so we've got this,
Yeah.
and remembering the grid and healing the ley lines is a big part of this.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Um,
Billy, have we got questions, darling? Did you want to?
There wasn't really any questions, there were just more comments. Someone mentioned that Howard Springs was a quarantine spot in COVID.
oh, wow.
That
Hmm.
was quite interesting. Um, think there's been a bit more chat now. Synchronicity that you mentioned, walls of Jerusalem clearing and opening up there at St. Clair, Lake St. Clair, connection to Sinclair family guarding
Interesting.
Roslyn Chapel near Edinburgh.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just looking. I'm looking at the Great Lakes right now, so I'm looking at in the moment Lake Huron, which is kind of in the middle, but Detroit is on a St. Clair River, and Lake St. Clair is there. It's like between Lake Huron and Lake Erie, which I don't think existed until recently.
Interesting.
I think that was part of, I think lighthouses, railroads were places where the land broke off and sheared and sank. And that lighthouses were not built to be right next to the water to guide ships. They were part of this grid system that was distributing light. And then when the grid was destroyed, everything just, and so there's lighthouses all around the Great Lakes and railroads.
I've noticed that the railway line itself, like the tracks, can be conductive. I mean, if you get two people sort of holding hands and one's holding a track each, you can get a pulse going through you in certain locations along a railway track. So I guess that is part of the grid system.
Yep. Yep. That's what I
Wow.
believe.
Wow. Okay.
Absolutely.
Because it always seemed rather kind of odd to me because like they're not run on that energy supposedly. Tram systems obviously are, but there must be another factor to it.
So it was a highly advanced free energy generating transmitting system.
Oh,
Very highly advanced. And it was all perfectly tuned. It was a perfectly tuned scientific and musical instrument. And so I have another friend that's doing some incredible work on harmonics and things like that. And she's bringing in some interesting information that overlaps with what I'm doing. But I don't have the sound frequency music part. That's not part of my gift.
yeah, yeah.
So, but I can see the connections and how that works. So if you've got a perpetual motion free energy generating system going across the surface of the earth, everything was perfectly. The cathedrals, the windows of the cathedrals, the bell towers, the organs, they were all part of it. I mean, you've got the beautiful organs in Sydney at the town hall. Why would a town hall have an organ? You have the one at the cathedral, beautiful organs.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the stories are really, really flimsy when you start looking at it. And you don't have to go far to
Great.
find this stuff, these
That's
things.
actually really heartening because these beautiful old buildings that they've put into this disgusting grid system that they're using as a loosh device, that means we can just shift it back and we don't have to destroy the buildings.
Yeah, I think something amazing is going to be happening as we go forward. You know, they can't destroy the grid. They can't destroy the creator. They can't destroy us as much as they've tried. And they got, oops. That's nice. Okay, my cat howled.
Oh, okay, okay.
Somebody's not happy over there.
Cats
Okay.
know a lot.
So anyway, I think it's something going outside the window. I hope. I got two. I had a senior companion cat that passed away in February. He was almost 21.
Oh,
Took
wow.
me a minute. Took me a minute, but I just adopted a senior bonded pair. So I've
Oh,
got two. So when I do travel, they have each other.
that's beautiful. Well done.
Um, so anyway, yeah, they're not going to get away with it, but they've thrown everything they could possibly think of at us, and then some. It's
Well, I
pretty
feel
diabolical.
they're very undermined as much as they might still be sort of going forward with their process. I feel like it's just falling apart. And I feel that energetically. And I know a lot of people think again that, toxic positivity, but I do believe it because that's my gut feeling. It's not that I want to believe that. I feel it.
Yeah, it's my feeling also. Hang on just a second.
Well, I guess should we I don't know if anybody John's got his hand up. So when
Yeah.
Michelle gets back, we'll start asking some questions. And then we'll wrap it up next 10 minutes or so. It's been very, very interesting. I was actually taking screen grabs as we were going because I was like, oh, I don't want to lose that.
Yeah. Yeah, if anyone
Yeah,
has any
this
questions, you can put them in the chat if you like, or yeah,
Yeah, for
put your
those who
hand
don't
up.
feel comfortable asking the question personally, I will get John to ask his question in a moment. If you want to put a question in the chat, feel free. That'd be great. All right, Michelle, we have John. Go ahead, John. Good to see you.
Hey, Rach. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, I just put a thing in the chat. I really don't know. It's not really a question. It is, I ramble on a bit, but I've been watching a bit of Chief Ironbush. I don't know if you watch any of his work.
I
And
haven't, but I've heard of him.
amazing man. And he breaks down the language that we've all been fooled with over the years and talks about a lot of things. And he sent me off on he's got me going. He was talking about the Earth, and he's doing a series at the moment called the Saturnal. I put it in there, the Saturnal something. The Saturnal Order, and I think he's still going. He was doing it about 4 parts, but he's up to about 5th or 6th part, and it's insane. It's got me thinking about gravity because he talks about the Earth, the North Pole being in the center of a bowl. And this is why we're not allowed around the ice wall as such, call it the ice wall. But what else he talks about, which you were talking about before in a way with your cat, he was saying that humans and most animals, our eyes are is it concave?
Yep.
And he's saying that there's certain animals like cats who see other dimensions because of the convex shape of their eyes.
Wow.
So with a concave eye, you actually, the theory of you break in the 7 colors and it comes into a point, and then all the images that we see inside our brain are upside down and tuned into one light ray with animals. And I don't know where I was going with this, but he talks very deeply about this. He's a very interesting guy. And he talks about ley lines. He's got me going about gravity. So I thought I'd just throw it in. But if you get a chance, have a look at it, even part 1. He's a very, very interesting guy, and he's coming from his heart. He's breaking down the language that we've all been fooled with. And that's all I've got to say anyway.
Cheers, John.
Cool.
That's the
Thanks
second time
again.
that's come up. So I've got to check
Yeah.
that guy out because Kristen was also
Same.
pointing him out. Yeah.
Who was talking about him?
Kristen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was in the prediction series with Angie a little while ago.
His work, he's very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
And it's really exciting that, there's so many pieces of the puzzle coming together because it's a vast puzzle. There's so much information that's been removed from our awareness. And what I find really cool from the experiences that I've been having are the synchronistic connections that happen with people that are mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And so, I know there's something more, but not any one person has all the answers. It's like we've all got our different parts of this.
It's got to be a team effort.
It has to be. There's too much. There's too
Jim,
much.
Jim, I know you've got something amazing to share. You always do.
Yeah, I'm off mic and you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. Hi, everyone, and thank you, Michelle. It's been a cracker of a presentation today. Much appreciated. I have a very deep fascination with stone arrangements and seeing these other Stonehenges pop up. There's places at Lake Titicaca and all over the globe. People have been measuring, solstices and equinox for millennia. One of my pet projects is a place called Wurdi Yuang, which is out west of Melbourne towards the Yuyangs, not surprisingly close to Geelong. And it measures those things with millimetre accuracy, and it's believed to be over 11,000 years old, which it's been coined as the oldest known observatory in the world. One thing that popped to mind about this, apart from the fact that it's a little known but very fascinating site that's on private land, similar to some of those pyramids, is that running almost through it or very close to it are high tension power lines, which I suspect it's a very high energy place. I have been there a couple of times, and the intersection of grids and ley lines is palpable. You can feel it. But I was curious, are power lines just transmitting power, or are they actually harvesting? I guess is perhaps my question to you.
That's a good question, because I would at this point say they're probably harvesting.
Mm.
I mean, that is not my area of expertise, but I live right next to what used to be a canal. It's called a creek. I'm in a trailer park. I've got my utility pole right out here, and I know that the railroads used to go along these creeks. And I've got big megalithic stone blocks outside my window. And so I'm not going to sell my place. I love where I live. But I think, again, that's part of the energy harvesting, that these utility poles and lines and whatnot are actually harvesting energy. And I've heard from other people that again, I think it's probably pre-existing, but also that they pull in, so it's still part of the free energy. Am I making sense?
Yep.
I'm also thinking, Michelle, if you've got those springs outside your property and the canal, you would be getting a lot of information from that ley line. That would be
It's
your
possible.
tune.
It's
That's
possible.
no
This
wonder you're
this
able to
this
do
this came this came together for me when I moved to Sedona, and that was in
that.
2017. And Sedona is a nodal point like Uluru,
Yeah. Wow.
um, one of 12, and that's when the synchronicities just went off the charts for me to do this.
Wow. Wow. I think your location
Um,
has a lot to do with it. That's spectacular. Thanks, Jim. That's a really good question. And I've
yeah,
actually been asked that many times because I teach a course on how to sort of see ley lines. And it does seem like a lot of roads and streets were originally ley lines because they create a natural corridor through nature, and then eventually they'll pave them and carry on. And they stick these stupid electricity wires all along them. And it probably does harvest some of the energy of people traveling in those spaces.
it definitely does. I mean, again, I'm in Prescott, Arizona. There's two main streets when you're coming in. You have Gurley Street and you have Sheldon. And I found a picture on a utility box downtown showing that there were tracks on Gurley Street. And then there's Thumb Butte, which looks like a giant tree stump a
Wow.
mile from where I live. And in old pictures, you see the old rails and you see them heading towards Thumb Butte. And then there's an old railroad bridge in town. And you wouldn't know that there were railroads here, except for there's little hints here and there. And then they just pave right over that, and you've got cars and you've got chaos, and they replace the free energy streetcars with cars that you have to put gas in, that you have to buy insurance for, that you might have a wreck in, that's polluting the environment.
Oh,
Um,
it's all by
you know,
design. It's
all
very
by
obvious.
design. Yeah. So that
Um,
the bad news is they've done a lot more horrible stuff here than we even know. The good news is they're not going to get away with it.
No, no,
No
no,
way in heck.
no. The more conversations like this that happen, the more people wake up.
yeah. We'll probably just do one more question, then we'll wrap it up, I think. Is there a ley line that goes through Brisbane City Hall and La Scala in Fortitude Valley? Do you know?
I don't know about that one specifically, but they're everywhere, so probably.
Yeah.
And you
The
can,
City Hall.
yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of got oriented to the ley lines as I was starting to wake up to this in places that I've been living since then. So since I found the star tetrahedron on the continent of North America, I was living in Oklahoma City, which is like pretty close to the middle of it. It's right in there. And once I found it, I started to see things differently. And
Yeah.
then same thing when I moved to Sedona, I had the same experience about learning where the ley lines were there. And then I started to see where I was in relationship to that. I've lived on them. My whole life I've lived on these things long before I was aware of it. So
Incredible.
again, I think there's some kind of communication going on there.
Well, you probably came into a particular family that would be, it sounds to me like there's not that many people who are awake in your family. It's probably not your soul family. You come into that
But
family.
the genes are good.
Excellent genes. Very good genes.
So it's very nice people in my family.
Well, look, I just want to share again your website and your YouTube channel. So if you want to find Michelle, Michelle Gibson on YouTube 8946, amazing channel. Also her website, Piercing the Veil of Illusion. And I'll just stop sharing there. And you also mentioned that you're getting together with a group of people in February.
Yeah.
I think it was the 21st to 28th of February next year at Golden Ridge. So
Yep.
we'll share the, if that's okay,
Yeah.
we'll share the email address and
Yes,
underneath the show notes.
please.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody's interested. Just a few openings left. There
We'll fill
is
them.
so there is some in the there's camping available.
Fantastic.
So it's limited in the retreat center. So we've got some openings there, but there's also the ability to do tents and RVs, or if there's overflow.
You'll get overflow. You'll definitely get overflow. I'm going to have to try and get there somehow. Thank you so much, Michelle. Such an absolute pleasure to
Okay.
have you.
Ed has a
Thank you.
question.
Oh, Ed, sorry.
I just wanted to say how wonderful it was that Rachel and you have got together and connected, and your research, Michelle, is just mind-blowing. And it was such a pleasure meeting you last year in Bosnia.
Yes, and that was amazing. Amazing group of people, and life-changing for a
Yeah,
lot of us.
yeah.
And I've got
And happy
shout out
birthday
to-
for next week,
Oh,
Michelle,
Yep, I've got my 62nd birthday coming up a
because
week
we're
from
twins.
Saturday.
oh,
That's
We're on the
right, we
same
are.
day.
That's right. Forgot about that, Ed. Thanks. Yeah, so we traveled to Serbia and Bosnia together last year,
wow. Wow.
Awesome.
and that was quite amazing. And then that's also, in terms of piecing the puzzle together, there's such healing energy there
Mm.
with the Bosnian pyramid, and then there's a pyramid called Ertan in Serbia. Very powerful places. And so what I'm finding is that this loving, I believe, source energy that was connected all across the earth through these pyramids, um, you know, growing things was enhanced on them. So agriculture, I'm finding agriculture of all kinds, whether animals, breeding animals, and unfortunately, the controllers have used these ley lines to grow GMO crops. And I found that also. But they reverse engineered this positive, powerful energy based on this grid system and turned it into a control system. So now we just got to turn it back to what it was originally, which is just this beautiful integrated system. But the love energy in Bosnia at the Bosnian Pyramid Complex is amazing.
Wow.
And healing energy. I mean, like off the charts. I can't pull numbers or anything like that, but you can feel it there.
I love what you said before as well. It's because we've got the earth on our side. She doesn't want this to be going on anymore. I described it as, she's got a freaking bra on. She doesn't want this grid system. It hurts. All us women know we take the bra off and fling it off at the end of the day because we can't stand the damn thing. So, we've got her on our side because she wants to clear this up. We've got beautiful, loving beings of light from other galaxies that are working with us to bring this about. So as long as we can wake up enough of humanity, and I think we're getting pretty close.
We don't have to wake up. We don't have to wake up everybody. We have to wake up enough.
Yeah.
And the collective consciousness, as it rises, it shifts the collective consciousness. So we may have already hit critical mass, but that is going to cause this shift in our consciousness. And I think it'll just explode with
I agree
people
with you.
waking up.
I think we've either already hit it and it's just people are catching up, or we're just about to hit it. So we're so very close. So on that beautiful note, thank you so much. Truly appreciate your efforts. I'll put your
Thank you.
connection, your website and your YouTube channel, and obviously your Golden Ridge meetup all in the show
Oh, hi, Ariane. Hi, Ariane.
notes. Thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Billy.
She was with us too.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh, you're also lucky. It sounds amazing. Wish I was there. All right, guys, thank you so much. And I'll send you the link to the video too, Michelle, so you can share it as well.
Okay. Thank you so
Thanks,
much, everybody,
everybody.
for joining
Thank
us
you.
tonight.
Bye.
Thank you.